It is my pleasure to introduce Mike Smith and Brett Danaher, who will be talking about their cool new book and what they're doing in core. And I have to tell you, I bought that book a few months ago and I read it in one sitting. So strongly advocate that you use it. It's even free for you guys. It wasn't free for me, Mike. I'm just kidding. I bought it before. It's a great book. I use it to illustrate so many concepts in my courses, but they should do the talking. So take it away.
Cool. Thanks, Vijay. We get $1.17 on each book that sells, so I'm more than happy to refund you all $1.17. So thanks, everybody. What's that? That's digital economics. You know, I'll buy you a coffee. Maybe that one. So I wanted to spend just a little bit of time talking about how I'm using and Brett is using this book in the core IT class at CMU and also at Chapman. Let me give you a high-level view of what we want to do in the book and then explain why I think that works really nicely in a core IT class. So this book comes out of a lot of research that Brett and myself and Rahul and I had been doing on how technology is changing the entertainment industry. So we've been doing a lot of research with the majors, particularly the major studios, on specific aspects of their business. And we started to ask, you know, is technology not just about how should your prices change or how should your promotion change? Is technology actually about is your core business at risk in fundamental ways? So we're trying to ask these three questions in the book. The first one is technology changing market power in entertainment? Is technology, and particularly big data, hurting the quality of entertainment? And then is there anything the majors can do to respond? And the fun thing about each of these questions is you can make a strong theoretical case on either side. So, you know, is technology changing market power in the entertainment industry? One of the quotes we use in the book is a major executive came to our class. We asked him this question, and he said, you know what? The same 6 studios have dominated my industry for the last 100 years. There's a reason for that. And what's really exciting about that answer is, on one hand, it sounds like hubris, but on the other hand, he's 100% right, historically. The same 6 studios for the last 100 years have dominated this business. And it's not like the internet's the first shift they've faced. They've faced massive technological shifts. And so the question for the students is what's different today that really seems to be upsetting this industry that wasn't true over the last 100 years? Same case can also be made for, is technology changing the quality of entertainment? So a whole bunch of very bright people in the industry saying, you know what, if you use big data to influence the creative process, you're going to screw everything up. And I think they're right. And yet, Netflix, Amazon, and Google seem to be making great content. And so again, the puzzle for the students is, why are Netflix, Amazon, and Google, data-driven companies, able to make such great content when, in fact, if you use data to influence the creative process, you're going to screw everything up, okay? And then the last question, which, again, I think is fun, is there anything the majors can do to respond? And we're trying to argue in the book that once you understand the answers, the sort of the structural answers to the first 2 questions, that the answer to the third question actually follows very nicely. What does this have to do with a core IT class? The nice thing that we've discovered is to answer these 3 questions, you actually have to lay out a bunch of the frameworks we would always use to explain you know, IT in the core. So you have to actually bring out a lot of these very nice frameworks. And so what we're advocating, and honestly the structure of the book came out of the way I would teach this in class for years. We just took that outline. So I think the structure of the book plays in very nicely to a core class. There are 1 of 2 ways you can do it. One way would be to sort of do the normal core frameworks that you would always do, and then say in the second half of class, we're going to illustrate those frameworks in the context of a specific industry, the entertainment industry. The way that Brett and I are doing it actually is more structured around, let's take a particular framework, illustrate it in class, and then let's apply it to the entertainment industry in particular. So let's talk about IT investment and the importance of IT investment, and then let's illustrate that in terms of what we see going on in the entertainment industry. Let's talk about competitive strategy and how technology can change competition, and then let's go back and illustrate that in the context of entertainment. And I should point out that these slides are online. I'm more than happy to send anybody who wants the detailed syllabus that goes along with this and the more detailed readings and assignments if you're at all interested. And I guess the other thing I should say right up front is there are a whole bunch more books over there. So if you haven't gotten a book, please do, because I don't want to take them back with me on the plane. And if you want, the first chapter of the book is available for free online. So if you want to just use the first chapter, you can actually give it away to your students. The first chapter is called House of Cards, and it really tries to explain why was Netflix House of Cards so different than everything else we'd always done in terms of television broadcasting. And it makes an argument that there were like 6 different things that all changed at once that allowed Netflix to do House of Cards in a way that nobody else in the industry could have done. Last piece I wanted to add in here is just why does using the entertainment industry as a way to illustrate technological change work so well, at least from our perspective? The first one is it's a very familiar industry to the students. So it really drives student engagement. Everybody has a nice experience with this content, and everybody can really participate in a fun, exciting way. Second one is, I would argue, this is where technological change, or this is at least one of the major industries where we're seeing massive technological change right now. And so the really cool thing about teaching this class is every week you've got a new news story that you can bring to the table. So Brett and I were just talking about, at the end of each of our courses was the Orange is the New Black hack. And so, students come into class and they go, "Hey, professor, did you hear about the Orange is the New Black hack?" And you can say, "Yeah, let's talk about that. We talked about piracy last week. What does this Orange is the New Black mean?" So, well, we know that piracy hurts sales. Yeah, that's true. Does it affect Netflix's business model in the same way it would affect a studio's business model? Oh, actually, I don't know. Maybe Netflix isn't hurt as much as the studios because Netflix is selling a subscription and not the individual product. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Is there anything that Netflix could do to respond to this hack that the studios couldn't? Oh, wow, actually, Netflix has much more flexibility when they release this content than a studio would. The studio has to release it during the normal fall season. Netflix could actually release this in advance. Oh, that's very interesting. So you can sort of suck up a good half hour of class in these things that really do a nice job of going back and illustrating all the points we made. The last thing I think is exciting about this, about doing the core class within a common example, is there are a whole bunch of other wonderful parallels to other industries that you can then say, okay, we've looked in detail at this particular example. Let's think about how this might apply someplace else, holistically. And so what I normally do, you'll notice in the last week, it's applications to other industries. What I normally do the week before that is I'll end class by saying, we've talked a lot about how technology changes industry power, but I think it's important for everybody to understand that some industries are insulated from technological change. There's some industries that don't have to worry about technology changing the power in their context. Like, I don't know, higher education, for example. We have nothing to worry about when it comes to technology changing our business and our power, right? And the students do exactly what you do. They start off by going, wait a second, right? And then you can go, okay, well, let's think about the frameworks we just talked about. And how does that apply to higher education? Because I've always been in power over the last 100 years. You're telling me that technology is going to change that? Give me an argument for why. And then they have to go back and apply. And it turns out there are a lot of really nice parallels. I hope I'm not depressing anybody, but there are a lot of really nice parallels between what's going on in the entertainment industry. And I would argue what's about to happen in higher education in terms of, consumers being able to choose much more easily, branding changing, the freedom of the creators to go directly to their audience, and it gets the students thinking, I think, really nicely about we've got to understand the fundamentals of structure before we can apply that to how industries change. Okay, last thing we wanted to do was Brett's going to talk about a specific teaching case example that he does, that we both do in our classes, but I'm going to hand it over to Brett to talk a little bit about Britannica.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so first of all, I have to say, this class really does have, if you wanted, it has the ability to be an elective, that's really about entertainment, or it could be in a media and technology program or something like that. But at the same time, I sort of agree with Mike that this is really, entertainment's the hook. It's what gets the students excited. It gets them wanting to enroll, that kind of thing. But then really behind it is the types of models that we want to teach anyway, right? And entertainment is really just what motivates the students to care and have fun and feel like, hey, I understand, I already know and deal every day with the products that you're talking to me about. So yeah, so as Mike said, I want to talk about just one, so this is kind of just one lecture or one class exercise as an example, and I think this is emblematic of what I try to do almost every class in this particular course. So teaching disruptive change, or Clay Christensen's disruptive change model. As a refresher, Clay Christensen, if you could break down disruptive innovation, he says there's kind of 4 tenets, right? Disruptive innovations perform worse along existing, I don't need to teach you guys this stuff, right? But I'm gonna try, so I teach the students this model, this Christensen framework and these 4 tenets. And I do it, actually, I sort of step away from entertainment at first, and I have them read the Shane Greenstein's Harvard business case on Encyclopedia Britannica and Microsoft Encarta and the disruptive change that happened there. But when we're analyzing this case, we really do it in light of each one of these 4 tenets of Christensen's framework. And that sort of sets them up as like, okay, this is sort of teaches the students, this is how you would think about innovations and whether they're disruptive or sustaining innovations, is you would look at these and then you'd apply it to what you're looking at, right? And since they've read the case, they really know what was going on there. They know a lot about what Encarta was different about Encarta than Britannica. And it gives them a real chance to see sort of a pedagogical moment where they see, okay, this is how I would apply this framework to an industry. And that's important because then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to separate them into groups, and I'm going to make them do it on their own. And I'm going to say, all right, that's, to students, this is like before they were born, right? So I say, let's bring it now back to entertainment. So I separate them into groups and I ask them, are streaming video services a disruptive innovation or a sustaining innovation? And this is a really good question because there's actually multiple ways that you can look at these streaming video services, and they bring you to very different answers. And I actually get groups making really solid arguments on either side of this. And I'll give you an example of how that works. So if you look at streaming video services purely as a technology, just streaming video, you can make a strong argument that it's a sustaining innovation, right? It can support the existing business model. It's more flexible than linear, so it can get you, it connects you with your customers better. It can keep viewers of serial content engaged in the sense that, on linear TV, you miss an episode and you might fall out of the program. But with streaming video, we have the ability to essentially get you watching non-linearly and keep you more engaged with serial content. It's very appealing to their business model if it's tightly controlled. So if they can tightly control what content they give to these services and when they get it, then it's very appealing because it's an additional way of monetizing the content. So after my first run and then reruns of Lost, I'm not really making that much money off of Lost except the occasional DVD box set here and there, right? But if I can start streaming it, 6 years after it's been on the air, if I can start licensing it to Netflix, suddenly it becomes another source of revenue. So the students come back with that, and that's a really interesting answer to the question. But then we flip it around, and there are other students who come up with the idea, wait a second, streaming services aren't just a technology. They're also it actually has led to a whole new format for watching a new platform and a new format for watching television. And that's changed the actual television that you can create. So I think there's this, remind me, is it Kevin Spacey or was it David Fincher who said that making House of Cards was like making a 12-hour movie?
Bo Willem, head writer.
Okay, head writer. Is that him? I got it right. I know, when I teach it, I know. But but he basically said making House of Cards was like making a 12-hour movie, right? And that's completely different, right? You don't need to have cliffhangers because they're binge watching, right? And Netflix is just, it's essentially people are watching it like a movie, right? You don't need to have ad breaks. There's no set runtime for your episodes or even a number of episodes that you need to have within the season. And that creates a whole new kind of like playground for the writers to do something that they didn't do before. And the subscription, as Mike already mentioned, the subscription model and also direct access to the consumers supports a very different type of content. Network television needs to create content that has at least enough appeal to the largest number of people to keep them on the channel. Versus Netflix's model is totally different. They just need to be, they basically want to pull in subscriptions. So if they can make content, almost like the hyper differentiation model, if they can make content that's really appealing to a niche of people, it may very well be worthwhile if that keeps those people subscribing for another 4 or 5 months. So once you start looking at streaming services in this light as sort of actually creating a whole new monetization model, a whole new type of content. I mean, House of Cards, why is it so good? Apparently, people really do like this type of content you can make when you're not stuck making having a cliffhanger every 15 minutes or something like that, right? So you can really teach them that this is completely different from the type of content and the monetization model from before. And what that means is that you can then put that into Christensen's framework, and you can say, hey, actually, this model is unappealing to the networks. This is kind of an unappealing model. They don't have the skill sets to do that. This is not the writers that they've been hiring for years. This is not the way they're trained to write. Nor do they even necessarily want to. They want ad breaks because it's hard for them to get their heads out of the idea that ads are where we make our money, right? We make our money by programming stuff that has a cliffhanger every 10 minutes so that we can get some advertisements in front of you. Netflix content also often loses viewers, and this is a known thing, right? Netflix content will often lose viewers in the pilot episode, and that would be death for any network television show. But for Netflix, it's okay. In fact, Netflix put out this study where they said, yeah, people don't get hooked to a show till the 3rd or 4th episode. So we're trying to get it to the point where the people who stay till the 3rd or 4th episode are going to finish. They're going to be hooked, right? And that's completely different from the way the networks think. So, if you think about that, that's a really nice. Where did I start? I started with Christensen's Disruptive. Actually, I started by assigning them the Harvard Business Case, Encyclopedia Britannica, and then a really summarized version of Christensen's framework. And then the first half of class is made up basically by going through Christensen in light of Encyclopedia Britannica. And then the next almost, I give them like 30 to 40 minutes. I have a 3-hour lecture once a week, but I give them 30, 40 minutes to really think about, all right, why don't you apply this to streaming services? And then we talk it through in class, and they see, oh, on one hand, here's an answer, but on the other hand, actually, there's a completely different answer. And so it really gives this is one of my favorite lectures, and I think the students come out of this really kind of excited and feel, and then it plays out down the line because, as Mike said, this lecture happened about halfway through, and then a couple weeks later, Orange is the New Black hack happened, right? And then, of course, more recently, now it turns out that Pirates of the Caribbean got hacked in advance, and the hackers are actually demanding ransom from Disney for Pirates of the Caribbean. And we can actually, in class, talk about the difference between how scared should Disney be versus how scared should Netflix be, and tie that back to this whole idea of disruptive innovation. So that's an example of just one of the exercises. Cool. The only thing I'd point out, Michael, and the only thing to point out, going back to what we talked about at the beginning with just, how technology actually leads to changes in some of the frameworks we even think about. The other thing I try to bring up in my course, and you may as well, is it's not like the television industries. In Christensen, we typically think about one disruptive change happening. It's not like the television and movie industries are facing one disruptive change. They're actually facing about 5 all at the same time. And that's something else that the students get to wrestle with. I think we have about 7 minutes for Q&A, if anybody has any questions or thoughts. Sure, Abby.
I like the paradigm of the entertainment industry because we get a lot of students, some international, some domestic. So if you talk about anything specific in healthcare, banking, and so on, we need to spend a lot of time getting in and out the specifics, and they don't get it. Whereas entertainment is something we all consume. So it's much easier to relate.
Yeah. Or you get the even worse case where there's somebody in banking who ends up dominating all the conversation. I don't know why I'm pointing to you, Mike, but sure. Talk a lot about, there's one of the quotes I use in class is Chase Carey from 21st Century Fox at an investors conference said, you know what, content creation and content creation at scale, which is what we have, has the upper hand over distribution. And you can talk about how historically he was always right. You know, owning content had the upper hand over being Walmart or Best Buy or Target. But now people who kind of look like Walmart, Best Buy, and Target, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, are starting to vertically integrate upstream into content creation in ways that we've never seen before. You can apply that in the context of, you know, porters, again, properly tweaked. And sort of think about, why are we seeing so much entry downstream in ways that we never saw before?
Yeah, and actually, if I could add to that, this class, you know, one of the ways that I do things with this is that a lot of the classes are sort of, we look at something in the past and then we study something right in the present or the next year or two, with only every now and then alluding to 5 or 10 years from now. But then the final project, which I assign to them, you know, 5 weeks in advance of the end or 6 weeks, their final project is, you know, you've been hired to essentially be a futurist consultant for one of the, you know, pick your industry, movies, books, television, whatever. You've been hired to essentially tell them what's the one thing I should be worried about 5, 10 years down the line, and what should I be doing as a result? And so I bring that in, like applying these models, start thinking about what's the next thing coming around where these models say, oh, we could be in trouble. And as an example, you know, the students come back with, you know, virtual reality as a potential disruptor to, I mean, we do the long tail model and they bring in virtual reality and realize that, wait, virtual reality is going to bring long tail to live events. And then they do a whole, you know, so it's really, it gets them thinking down the line the way your question implied.
Did you?
One just quick comment is, at my second annual conference, we had Warner Brothers speak, as well as Ticketmaster. Our YouTube channel is Center for Digital Transformation. We're famous for reviewing that. But there's so many more issues that obviously we don't have time to talk about. It's just sort of the window in between sort of when you release something in theaters to TV to Showtime in the case of Warner Brothers, blah, blah, blah. So, and they actually talk about them, so if you need examples and you can take snippets of it. But the question I had for you guys was, do you stop at the entertainment industry or do you do a lot more? Because most people actually go work around here in high-tech industries. Mm-hmm. So manufacturing technically, maybe manufacturing is not done in the US, but so do you draw parallels with those sectors? I'm just curious how you approach the physical world industries.
So the way I do it is, and Brett may do it the same way, is when you're applying the framework, that's when you talk about the other industries, and then you say, okay, and then we're going to have this common industry that we can all relate to, that we're going to apply it back to. For sort of hopefully on the front end, saying, you know, here's how it applies to manufacturing, or here's how it applies to high tech, and then on Thursday, at least in my structure where I'm not teaching 3 hours, I'm teaching twice a week. We're gonna talk about it in entertainment, and here's what we're gonna look at.
Yeah, no, I do the exact same. I think that's a great way to do this. Yep. I do the same thing. It's when I'm teaching the model, I do it outside of entertainment so that they get a survey of lots of different industries. And a lot of the Harvard business cases are written outside of entertainment. Right. And then every single model, we bring it back to entertainment as this sort of running theme, and that's where they get to do their own application of it.
Mine is digital transfer. I teach two, actually. Digital transformation to our IS students, and then marketing digital media to our entertainment and policy students. Yeah, and it's a core class, so you know they come in. It's gotten really good scores. You know, the students have not complained because there's enough coverage of other industries. The students have not complained about the application being entertainment. In fact, I think they like the fact that they can participate really easily with the material. Anjana?
You have tons of data about what he created and what he says. So much about our thinking can just become a good provider to data.
Yeah. Sure, yeah.
at the end of it, not one person had said a car. And I said, isn't that odd that Facebook probably knows more about the next car you want to buy than your current tenants? You can play with that. So it plays off your point there.
Yeah, and in fact, and then if I were to illustrate that in the context of entertainment, right? You could come back and say a lot of people talk about. A lot of people say Netflix was able to greenlight House of Cards before anybody else in the industry because they were able to look into their data and they discovered that there were a bunch of Kevin Spacey fans, a bunch of David Fincher fans, a bunch of fans of the BBC's House of Cards, and that's what allowed them to do it. And then you can go back to the student and go, but wait a second, everybody in the industry, everybody in motion pictures knows Kevin Spacey's a big fan. David Fincher has lots of fans. What did Netflix have that nobody else in the industry had? And the answer is they knew exactly who the David Fincher fans were and exactly who the Kevin Spacey fans were. And it's kind of like that, where you can say, yeah, I can do surveys that'll tell me what people like. But knowing what VJ likes, that actually changes everything in terms of how I can target stuff.
But I think you. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah. Sorry.